Warning Democracy Collapsing. It is the title of a book of some studies recently published by the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Let's start from here. What is the greatest enemy of liberal democracy, and what successes had it achieved so far?
In my opinion, the greatest enemy of liberal democracy are indifferent citizens, probably. Because only when the citizens are indifferent to whether they have a democracy or they live in an authoritarian system, then it is possible to topple or to overthrow the existing democratic structures. And indeed, currently, we see a lot of pressure in these directions. And so we hope to have active citizens who are ready to defend the democracy we are having.
But this is the questions about how does democracy really collapse? Are there warning signs beforehand? Does it collapse, I don't know, with a bang or like a soldier on a battlefield?
Yeah. So, indeed, I am a German. So when I'm talking about the collapse of democracy, of course, my historical reference point is the fall of the Weimar Republic and the descent of Germany into the national socialistic totalitarian regime. And indeed, in that period, we saw that a full-fledged democracy with deficits like everyone has was very easily overthrown and toppled by institutions and laws that were not prepared for attack. They have been written to exist in a democratic, well-meaning environment, but they have not been prepared for, let's say, vicious and ill-intended attacks. So that is also, I would say, so democracy usually does not fall like as a soldier on the battlefield, as you said. It's not one strike that kills democracy. It is usually over a longer period, multiple attacks targeting the weak points in a structure. Additionally, undermining the will of the citizens to obtain a democratic structure and democratic institutions. So I think it is a series of attacks and threats. And these are when we want to decide whether a democracy is in danger, we need to observe several pressure points. It's never only one.
In the past, we had these big dictatorships, but these days we are talking about soft form of autocracies, illiberal regimes, compromised form of democracy. How can we recognize, the sign of a collapse of democracy in this case? And where would you place Romania?
So in this publication you were citing, we had the Professor Christian Plate, and he wrote in one of his articles, and this stuck to my mind, democracy cannot exist without pluralism. And in my opinion, the first attacks are always against pluralism and transparency and accountability of the actors in the system. These are the first that are weakened and that are hollowed out. And sometimes it remains there. This is it's also because a lot of people think what constitutes a democracy is frequent and regular free elections. Yeah, this is like always our gold standards. But you can have elections. You can also have regular elections like in Russia. Yeah, but this is not the only it's not the only constituent. If the elections are not in a free environment, if there aren't political parties that can freely express their opinions, that can express opposition, or that can exert opposition or can be an opposition, if there is not a free media, if media access is not equal, if the parties cannot organize and finance on an equal basis, if the ones have much bigger influx of financial means than the others. All these are factors that are undermining democracy. And it's always a bit difficult also in academic terms, because there is not the one gold standard of democracy where we say, so this is the model, and then we can say by degrees you get farther and farther away of them, because historically and also culturally we have different expressions of the idea and the ideal of democracy. So there can be a variation. So we have democracy in India. And it works different than democracy in Great Britain. We have undoubtedly democracy in Great Britain, and it looks different than democracy in Germany, where we also undoubtedly have democracy. We have very undoubtedly a non-democratic system in Russia, and we have very undoubtedly a non-democratic system in Iran, for example. And then we have a multitude of systems in between. And so actually in every case, we need to look where we are. So I guess now you are interested in my take with foreign eyes on Romania.
Yeah, how do you assess the situation in Bucharest?
Well, so we are happily electing, sometimes also several times the same elections, which is a good thing. So the first thing I would like to say is I am very happy that Romania is a part of the European Union, and therefore it fulfilled a lot of democratic standards in the moment they entered, because this is the prerequisite, and so we had a good standard of democracy. I would actually say that there is some corrosion, unfortunately, in my opinion, in the democratic structures of Romania. I would say we have a corrosion very deep down in the fundament of the state. And this comes, from Romania and history, the incomplete transition to democracy after 1989.
And even before,
and
during the communism.
Especially we come from the communist part, and then we had an incomplete transition, I would say, into democracy. And this incomplete transition, a lot of powers were in play in 1989, 1990, and the 90s that did not have an interest of having a full-fledged liberal democracy in Romania. So in my opinion, there were people who put systematic weaknesses into the institutions and also into the legal system and framework in Romania. We all know, I think, living in Romania, that here is a huge corpus of laws which you can interpret like this, but also like that.
Even the Constitution.
Even in the Constitution.
That was the stake, the political stake at the beginning.
Exactly. And we all know this, and this is what I would call corrosion deep down in the fundament of the democratic building of democracy. In my opinion, it would be very good to address this corrosion and really think about something like a constitutional convent, something like convening the intellectuals, the scientists, but also normal interested citizens, and talking about this inbuilt, inherent weaknesses, and also about the interest, why this has been put there, because it's not by chance. It has been put there by default in order to have something to break in the right moment, and also what some external powers might be interested in having these weaknesses in deep down in the fundament of democracy. Okay, nevertheless, on this fundament, we had a democratic construction in Romania. I would say it had some weaknesses in the area of rule of law, which have never been completely solved. But I would also say that we had an erosion. So there's not only a corrosion, but also an erosion. Like a lot of issues, minor ones, bigger ones, which have deliberately not been addressed. And they stack and stack and stack. And so sometimes you can also have the impression, I mean, if you would be rude or mean, you could ask, like, is democracy in Romania like a Potemkinsian facade? So it looks good.
Exactly.
Yeah, but how much is really behind it? That is so this is a little bit of overcritical. I would not yet go there completely, but there is definitely the facade is looking better than what is behind. And I think we need to talk about real structural reforms and not only about decorating.
Exactly. This was the root cause, do you think, for what has happened in November with presidential elections?
Yes. Yes, I would say so. I see several root causes. You know, one of my specialty is working with political parties because we do need political parties in a representative democracy. Without parties, we cannot organize opinions, we cannot organize interests, we cannot organize also finding a compromise between interests and ideas. And when we look into the way the political parties are working in Romania, I do see real challenges ahead. I mean, in the way power is generated inside the political system. I am not against political power. I know this is a term which is very often, you know, always used as the system and the boogeyman. And I think political power is a very important thing because political power allows us to create. It allows us to implement something like a political vision into reality. And I think that is the very good and positive and constructive part of political power. But we have always to be extremely careful to understand how political power is generated. In my opinion, the political power belongs to the citizens and they gift it temporarily via elections to politicians to do what they promised in their campaigns and what they have been elected for. And if they don't like what's happening, the citizens can take it back.
That's the problem.
That's
is
the problem.
in between elections?
In between elections. So, what I'm seeing is that in the party system, this understanding sometimes is not incorporated. It is more like there is more an understanding like, okay, we are entities out of our own right. And okay, we need to do these elections because we need to do them. Yeah. And then we have the power and then we do with the power as we see fit. So this sense of responsibility between party politics and citizens, in my opinion, is in miscommunication. And this is something I think needs to be mended. I think this also is, I also would like to see Romanians to be more demanding citizens, to ask more and to be more demanding of their politicians and really standing up in citizens and saying, no. We are not here to elect you. You are there to serve our interests. And, you know, this kind of unwritten contract between citizens and politics. This is what I would like to see change. And this should also create a mind shift in the parties. I do think there are points also in the legislative bodies or in the ideas how the parties work. For example, in Romania, the president of a party or the head of the party holds a lot of power, much more than in other countries, in my experience, because the head of the party leader, constitutes the list for the elections. So where any politician is on the list depends mainly on where the party leader puts him or her.
Exactly.
And this is also due to the fact that we do not have like direct candidates in constituencies. In Romania, we only elect via the list.
Yes.
If you have like, for example, direct candidates, they have their constituency behind their backs, and they can come into parliament or into the party and say, look, I am elected by so and so many thousand of votes. I will not agree with this proposal, because if I do, I will lose my votes. And these politicians, when they have direct mandate, they have a much stronger standing, and they cannot so easily be shuffled in political tug war in the parliament.
Yeah.
And as we don't have that at all in Romania, it's not foreseen. We just have this voting via lists.
Exactly.
It transfers a lot of power to the heads of the party. A lot of power in one position, again, is always it's always problematic.
Yeah.
And so the parties are one of the aspects, and then we can go through it. There are a lot of different aspects, I think, which explain what happened with the elections. So, we had the parties who had their ideas, who should be the next president, creating scenarios which they wanted that the voters should vote for. The voters were like, no, this is not going to happen. I know a lot of Romanian voters who told me my main decision factor at the presidential election was not to play the game I was supposed to play. And I didn't care for the outcome. I just didn't want to be like cattle which is pushed in a certain direction.
And not to vote all over again, the lesser of two evils, because this was the strategy of mainstream political party in Romania after the collapse of communism.
Yeah,
I am the lesser of two evils. I don't care if I am evil too. I am the lesser.
Exactly. But this is what I meant to describe with this. This is like a ruptured contract between voters and politicians, because how do you get in a mindset where you think up a very complex scheme in order to force voters to vote in a certain way? This is not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to offer political ideas, campaign for them, and try to convince the voters to give you their vote, give you their piece of power so that you can implement this. This is what it's about, actually. It's not about creating a complex scheme to push voters in a direction which has nothing to do with political ideas, programs, projects, reforms, not at all. And so people were very angry about this. Then we had what we already talked about. We have let's say, it's euphemistically, we could say we have an ambiguous legal framework, which can be interpreted like this or that. I mean, after the presidential election, the first round was annulled. We weren't even sure what does this mean for the president. Can President Johannes stay in office, or has the president of the Senate take over? It
depends on who is reading the law.
Exactly. It is ambiguous.
Yeah.
And actually these are points where you do not want to be ambiguous. This is where a constitution should have a very clear answer. And this is why I would say, for example, also the question, a lot of questions were just simply open. And of course, the Constitutional Court, they were filling these gaps by speaking law, interpreting it, creating law, which is also the rule of, it's also the role of institutions. So it's their role also to evolve and to develop a legal framework. But the gaps have been so big. And then again, communication. This is one of the next big things which I think constitutes a weakness in the democratic system. Communication, it's not on the list. I mean, when you look for the markers of democracy, it's like regular elections, free and fair elections. It's not about transparency and communication. It's not on the first list, but I think it is inherent to the system in order to make it able to function. Voters can only exert their their voting rights if they know what they are voting for. If you have educated voters,
for example,
if you have informed voters.
For example, do you know what really happened in November? For example, to what extent it was a malign state like Russia? To what extent it was a creation of our intelligence? That's the biggest conspiracy, let's say it.
So what I can know as I mean, I'm not even a Romanian citizen, let's say someone who lives in Romania and observes with great sympathy what is happening. So what I know are the bits and pieces we got from the constitutional court and the institutions, or when the president was speaking, or the documents from the CESAT that have been published. But much more information came from the journalists, from the investigative journalists. And this is something I'm always stressing a lot when I'm talking about what is happening. The journalists played a major role in shedding a light what has happened. And most of the things we know today about what was going on is because of the investigations of journalists in Romania. And I think the journalists, the independent journalists in Romania, they did such an immense service to the people. And I think you should all get a medal for this, actually. I should all get decorated, because the official information that was issued is just a fraction of what we know today, thanks to journalistic investigation. The journalists are doing the role in the system of separation of powers. A lot of other institutions don't. So and this is also something which I think is very critical. You know that the whole topic of media freedom is also an issue. It has to do something with cartels, and oligopoles which have been created. So this is another topic we could talk about. But as far as we know, thanks to the journalists right now, is that we have had a mixture of, yes, external interference and internal interference. And if we look at the internal interference, it is very unclear whether state institutions have been involved, to what degree, who did what and why, what did the parties do, what did they do with public money. We don't have a full transparency also on the party financing and what is financed. And all this together is a very it is a very displeasant soup, I would say. And it is, in fact, very difficult to take it apart. So
no institution took responsibility, but we have only scapegoats.
We have some scapegoats. There were much too few people who took responsibility. We have very few politicians who really stepped back after the elections and sticked with it.
Exactly. Not coming back, because
not coming back again. And I would say if we look at the scale of the political crisis we are actually having in Romania currently, the level of taking political responsibility doesn't match at all. And also, if we look into the institutions, for example, okay, there was Mrs. Shoshuaka who wanted to run for the presidential. She was not allowed. Okay, you could have very serious questions about this ruling of the constitutional courts, which we should discuss in public and broadly, and we should probably also address from a legislative point of view. But then we had Georgescu, which I didn't know very well, and a lot of other Romanians also were not completely aware of his background. And if you take the markers which led to exclude Mrs. Shoshuaka to run, why did we let him run? And who asked these questions? Did we discuss this question? That was a fundamental flaw. Were there others among the candidates who should not have been permitted if we use the same standard which we applied to the one candidate who wanted to run to all the others? So obviously, if we take the standard that was applied to Mrs. Shoshuaka, then why didn't it apply to the others in the same way? Very important question to ask. Very important question where people should make their positions clear and probably be made accountable for that. Then we have this question mark concerning this general decision. So where is the debate? What do we do to erase this question mark?
Exactly.
And this is I do think actually I do think it was a good decision of the Constitutional Court to annul, because in my opinion this was not a fair election for several reasons. The question is also, why did the Constitutional Court have to do it, and why didn't the electoral office? What is the role again of the electoral office, and how do they interpret the rule? How really functions the interaction between the electoral authorities and the Constitutional Court? All these questions came up, and I think they need to be solved. So it's not, I think it's not only about right or wrong, and it's not only mistakes or not made mistakes. It's a lot about the processes. It's a lot about the self-understanding of institutions. And I'm also, I'm not the pessimistic person who says, look, there was a mistake or something didn't go to plan and now it's all over. No, but it should be a starting point. I think what we experienced, and I think it was like a political detonation, this should lead to a nationwide discussion process and a reworking and a revision of how does our democracy, how do our institutions work, and what can we do to avoid to be in the same situation again. And I think this needs to preoccupy us much more than, being in a state of catastrophic Armageddon scenarios, and say, wow, everything is horrible, nothing works, and Romania.
But it is easier for a politician to speculate fear, and it is easier to politician to maintain the status quo.
Exactly.
Because you see, we have the same politician now on the agenda.
But I mean, we need to raise the expectations and the bar. And my bar is like to create the future and to build the future and to think about, okay, we had an experience. We saw some things are flawed, they don't work. So what now? And this is what I expect from the parties. In my opinion, the job of the political parties right now needs to be to formulate a political vision. How do we want Romania to look like, to function, to work in, let's say, 10 to 15 years? Ideally, eliminating the issues we are currently having. And what is my proposed way to get there? This is what I would expect. And this is... and this is what I'm not seeing, and this is why I'm currently also angry with the candidates who are now running for the elections in May. What I want to see is a vision for Romania. What does this society? How should this society work? How should this state work? How should the institutions work?
Exactly.
And how do we get there? This is what I want to talk about. Not when I'm following the talk shows and think, but what are we talking about? This is not the point. I mean, we're in a deep crisis and we need to see a vision. This is like a very is a banal thing or truth. I mean, if you want to get out of a crisis, whether it's in your private life, your professional life, or your political life, you need to have a vision where you want to go to. And this is what I'm currently missing, and I want to have a debate on that.
You know, there is a concept in political literature for how Romania's democracy handled these elections. It is called militant democracy, but we cannot stay in this militant democracy forever, because it will not be a democracy anymore.
No, we cannot, and we also don't want to, because when you look around, the people are really stressed.
Yes.
The situation has an impact on people down into their private lives. This is nobody wants to live in this ambiguous doomsday scenario of instability. And we have a political crisis in Romania right now. We have the war in the neighboring country of Ukraine. We have high political instability due to the new Trump administration, which is affecting our general security landscape in Europe and the economic sphere. And the pockets and the economic sphere with the tariffs on top of that. And this is just a level of pressure which is much too high. And you have already mentioned it, and we know it. Populists have an interest of maintaining people in this situation and then appearing as the only solution.
Exactly.
Yeah, but if we have an dysfunctional parties and dysfunctional political scene and a dysfunctional ruptured contract between citizens and political parties, we play into this game actively, because when you have a crisis for democratic and for parties, there should be an interest to solve it as quickly and efficiently as possible.
But
this is like a no-brainer, let's say, and this is not what we are seeing. So, and then there are always, why is it not happening? Don't they have the capacity, the knowledge to do it, or don't they have the will to do it, or a combination of both? And I think these are the painful truths or the painful debates we have to have. And my bad news to the citizens is you cannot sit back and say, I ignore the situation because I can't do anything, because in the end in the end the entity, the unit who will bear the brunt of everything coming down will be the citizen. So either you invest the time and the energy and the frustration now to make the political process more functional, for example, by being an active citizen, being in civil society, going into a party, creating a new party, creating a citizen pressure group, whatever, or you will have to invest the energy and the pain later when everything has fallen on your head. And so this is why this is also why I started with stressing the importance of the citizens. I would like to self-empower the citizens.
Yeah, you even in the book, you mention a quote from Konrad Adenauer relating to this necessity to involve each and every one of us. Do you think that Romanian society has more apathy than other societies?
I wouldn't single out Romania. I would say Romania comes from a communist system where any citizen activity has been actively discouraged. Because this is also one of the signs or one of the signals of authoritarianism, to basically give the citizens the impression you are powerless, you cannot change anything. either you will be punished or, the system is like it is, and whatever you do, it won't change. And this is, we have a hierarchy, and those on top, they know best, they will do everything. So this is something that that is transferred in authoritarian regimes in a very massive way. And so we have several generations who grew up in communism, so it appeared right and correct to them. And after the fall of communism, the 90s were not a period where people had time to develop a civic engagement. They were busy with surviving.
And the former politicians from the communists were busy to survive too.
And exactly. And again, we did have, I would say, an incomplete transition. In Romania, it was never the democratic opposition who came to power. In a lot of other countries who came out of communism, the democratic opposition came into power. They did a lustration. This didn't happen in Romania. So I would say the conditions for Romania were were more difficult than for others. And I think this is what we see reflected. It's not like the fault of Romanians for being less active or less citizen than others. It was just that the framework conditions are especially difficult. The same, by the way, goes for Russians. When it's always asked, like, why are the Russians not opposing against Putin? They have this system for a very, very long time. So this is also always a part of the truth. So I do not, I don't want to shame and blame Romanians. It's more like for explaining, but I would also say it quite frank and openly, because this is part of the vision. If we want to get out of this mess, it will require to empower Romanian citizens. It will require to empower people to speak up, to accept that there is a pluralism, that it's good when people have different opinions.
Yeah, but you see, we have almost a perfect polarized society, not only in Romania, in the United States, even in Germany. How do you reach people who are already trapped in these alternative realities created by populists?
Yeah, well, this is the 1 million euro question, Magda. So we have the same thing in Germany also going on. So by no means I'm sitting on a high horse. So I think this is an issue we all have in Europe and in the United States as well. It's a general issue of our time. I think, in time we very often have this meta movement of political trends. And currently I think we have a meta movement which is putting liberal democracy under a stress test. So we are probably in an uphill battle, but nevertheless, also uphill battles can be won. So how I think what we need to do, and this is especially also what civil society does, we need to do everything we can to work against polarization. And this starts from the private. I know it is super easy to get annoyed with people who are in their bubble and argue in their bubble, repeat conspiracy theories, repeat these narratives from the authoritarian camp, or also sometimes these implanted Russian narratives. It is very stressful, but I think it's the only way. So my favorite hobby is when I'm driving in a taxi, in Uber, or in Bolt in Romania, is having a political discussion with a taxi driver. Because I am brave and I'm doing it with my really bad Romanian. So I need to get some extra credits for that. And usually these dialogues or discussions, they start from a very harsh corner.
Yes.
And very often also with personal attacks. And it's very difficult to let that stand and not react with a personal reaction. But, by asking questions, sometimes the first thing I do, and this is more what I do in Germany I'm happening to be in a discussion with someone from the extreme right. The first thing I need to do is really to get them to see me as a human being, because sometimes the the discourse is so harsh. People are so annoyed that they don't see you as Magda or Katja, but they see you as a representative of
Exactly.
something they hate. And that's the way they treat you. And I think the first thing is to get on a human level. And but you can talk about cats, dogs, children, whatever. And when you have the impression that you're seen as a human being, then it is about, okay, explain me, please, the way you see it, because I really want to understand your point of view. And then when they do, by and by, you can say, okay, I understand where you come from. Do you want to know where I come from? And I almost always get a yes.
So to rehumanize the
Yeah.
other and to know each other's story again, because
Yeah, this is the first thing. I think and this sounds super crazy, yeah, but we are now in the business of rehumanizing the other and their opinion. And if we are there, then we can only start to talk. And actually, I don't mind if people don't agree with me. That's not my problem. What I mind is this dehumanizing and this stuffing people into a box and then ignoring them and pushing them aside, because this is the negation of pluralism. And this is what I'm seeing. And this is what makes this polarization so dangerous. The danger is the dehumanization of the other. This is something I think we have learned from our German history, where this leads. And I do see these tendencies afoot when we look at some of the discussions we are.
tribalization, living in
Yeah,
tribes.
yeah, and I think this is what we need to work against.
What do you think is the stake of this new US administration when it criticizes liberal democracy using Romania as an example? Is it an ideological stance or maybe a practical one, like realpolitik?
This was actually really surprising that they used Romania as an example, because let's be truthful, when did anyone ever use Romania for an example in such a dialogue? So this was really, okay, I think one of the first thing is Romania has not been the only example.
Exactly.
So we had also had Germany, Scotland, Sweden, I think, been bashed on. So it's not only Romania, which is already good, but nevertheless, I think that the situation is very scary for Romania, because if we are looking at security and the way security was constructed, for Romania, that's my perception, the biggest guarantee for security was seen in the bilateral relations between Romania and United States. On second place came NATO, on third European Union, and all kind of other bilateral relations in the European framework. Also, it was often presented in the speeches the other way around, but I think it's the truth. It was constructed like this. So any attack on the bilateral relations is an attack really to the heart of the Romanian security perception. And I understand why, therefore, this change in the United States behavior towards Romania is so very shocking and concerning. What I do not understand is the absolutely inappropriate reaction I'm seeing in the political discourse currently. Because what I am seeing is that a lot of the politicians I'm seeing in talk shows right now draw the conclusion is, okay,
we have to be MAGA.
We have to get MAGA, and we have kind of to roll over and try to be Trump's pet. And I do not see how you can come to the conclusion that this strategy will work, because we do know from observing.
It didn't work with Viktor Orban.
It didn't work with Viktor Orban, it worked with nobody. And it will not work because the only thing that Trump recognizes is strengths. And you can be very playful about this, like President Macron when he went to the Oval Office. But behind his playfulness and this flirty attitude is ironclad strengths. Exactly. Romania, and the same is with Keir Starmer. Okay, you know, he had his little envelope from the king, and he was playing his cards very well.
Yeah, but they even debunked some fake news of Trump.
But they even debunked some fake news, and they made their positions very clear. And I would wish actually for Romania to, for example, take orientation from how Poland or Finland works. Of course, it would not be wise to antagonize Trump for nobody, and especially if we look, I mean, how big Romania is, how much inhabitants, what is the economic power. You will not want to attack him or antagonize him, and nobody wants that. But rolling over is also not helpful. I think the message would be, okay, we as Romanians, we will do everything and more to make sure that we ensure our own safety. This is what the Polish government is doing. They say, so we will first and foremost take care of ourselves. The second thing I would do is I would run to all the other European countries and drastically ramp up my bilateral relations and also my network of relations. And this is something where I think Romania can grow. I think Romania can grow their network of cooperation, of representation with the other European partners drastically.
So we don't have to choose between United States and European Union. This is a fake.
This is totally a fake choice. I think currently, I think where you have the biggest room and the biggest, let's say, the lowest hanging fruit to quickly improve would be to strengthen the network with the other Europeans. And because there will, a new security structure will be formed. The question is, will Romania be a part of it in Europe? And so this is where actually I would put currently my initiative, and you know, insulting other Europeans and berating them and trying to think this will help you with Trump is not a good strategy. And for example, let's also look at Finland, not the biggest country, not the most inhabitants, with a long border with Russia. They are also not playing their relationship with the Europeans against the relationship with the US. So Finland is very, very clear about their positioning, very, very clear about their connections, very friendly with the neighbors and the whole European, and going golfing with Trump. And so I think this is something I would see. But the current strategy is not working, and I am deeply worried. If I'm looking at this pick of a special envoy, I don't know why he was picked. This is, I mean, there is
because it seemed to be a big shift in Romanian diplomacy.
Yeah. And I think Romanian diplomacy on an institutional level is doing great. I do not think why should we step out of this framework, and I do really not see the benefit of this person in particular.
You don't see the benefit for the country. What about some politicians?
I don't see it. I mean, I'm an external spectator, and I think there are so many low-hanging fruits, and there are so many big improvements that can be made for Romania on the European level. For example, I really liked how interim President Bolosan interacted with in the framework of the European Council in this EPP group meetings with the others. And I think this is where a lot of improvement can be made. Focusing on these networks, focusing also on inter-party relations, which again, we would need fully functional political parties with international bureaus, which contacts with their partner parties, which get into significant and deep exchange with the European partner parties, also on a party level. We need dialogue on civil society level. I think this is what I think what would strengthen. We are having it, but I think this can be ramped up massively.
Let's hope that this electoral campaign will be short, because it seems that we postpone our good behavior and some good decisions.
Yeah, but Magda, really, I have to tell you, so I came to Romania late 2021, and I started at Adenauer Foundation officially in early 2022. And since that, I'm constantly hearing, well, Katja,
after the elections,
we cannot do these reforms now, because first we need to solve some leadership issues, and then we need, and then we can do it, and then the elections, and then we will do it. And basically, since I came, I didn't see major political reforms, groundbreaking
ones. You seem to have learned many things about Romania, this procrastination culture, and the culture of talking with Uber drivers. So you know a lot of things about that.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, we all like to procrastinate. And I mean, looking at Germany, we have the same issue. Also, we have so many reforms we need to get done. We have so many open loopholes we need to get done. But currently is not the time to, push problems aside and say, let's ignore them for a bit. They will solve themselves or get irrelevant. This does not work now. Maybe it was okay 10 years ago, but now it's not the time. Now we really need to tackle issues and solve them, because you see how quickly they stack, and
how quickly the big history is changing.
And it's really about get your act together, because this is the situation now. The next round of election is going to be 2029, 2030. We need to think about this time frame. And if we don't, then we might have a very nasty wake up then. So I think the next years are the last opportunity to get the reforms done and to get the repairs done and to make significant changes in order to strengthen our institution and structures against this continuous onslaught.